Welcome to Pick Up and Deliver, the podcast where I pick up my audio recorder as I step off the train and deliver an episode to you while I walk home. I'm Brendan Riley. Well, hello listeners. It's a lovely day here in suburban Chicago. I'm on my way home from my evening of classes. The board game class has finished for the week, and I'm now on my way home to have some dinner before I turn around and come back tomorrow morning for my teaching methods and pedagogy course. It's a lovely evening. I'm walking in shirt sleeves and it is just delightful. So, ha ha, ha ha. I got short sleeves, not shirt sleeves. I don't wear a suit, so shirt sleeves isn't really a thing I do. Well, this week in my board game class, we talked about folk games and party games. And it occurred to me, I don't know if I've ever done an episode just talking about different party games I like. And then I went and looked I went to rattleboxgames.com and I searched the Pick Up and Deliver section, and I did not find any episodes where I just had the phrase party games there. There must be some, and I may have talked about this already, so apologies if this is repetitious, but I don't recall having done so. So what I did is I picked out 5 categories of game that we talked about in my class today, and I thought I'd share with you my favorite of each kind. I would love to hear your thoughts on your favorite of each of these kinds of party games. Why do you like them? And which ones do you think I forgot or I should try? You can head over to Board Game Geek Guild 3269 and share your ideas about that. So, to start with, the first thing I want to talk about is word games. There are a lot of party games that don't make word games good. Word games can be really challenging to make for a good party game. I have several runners up. I would certainly put So Clover as a strong runner up for me for a good party game. I would certainly put Codenames as a strong runner up, although both So Clover and Codenames suffer from the same problem, which is that they are too gamey. They're too thinky. I love them, but they are too thinky to be party games. So Clover is also more limited in that you really can only play 6 people. Codenames you can play 10 easily. It's a little crowded, but it can work if you have the right group. You can't play more than 6 unless you get multiple copies of So Clover. So Clover and Codenames would both be runners up in that category. I was very tempted to give it to Just One because Just One is an incredible party game. Of course, you can only play 7 people, but it's easier to fake the equipment if you wanted to play more. You really shouldn't, though. 7 is the right number, but I consider Just One a party game. For the other things it involves, generally I define party game as quick to explain, easy to learn. The experience is more important than the score, and you can jump in and out easily. Those are the things that really give me the definition of party game. So Just One, or Codenames and So Clover both come up short in the jump in and out easily part, and frankly in the easy to explain part. Although So Clover is really not very hard to explain, Codenames is, or more so. But the game that I would put at the top of the list for party game related to words is Anomia. Now, I only have the regular set of Anomia, which has 2 decks. There is a deluxe Anomia that has like 6 decks or 8 decks. And if I didn't have Anomia at all, that's the one I would pick up. But I have the 2-deck one, and it's fine. Anomia is very clever. The way it works is you get dealt a card in front of you, and the card in front of you has a color on it and a category. And the category could be something like magazines or large cities or states that end in A. And your opponent, who has the matching symbol and color on their card, would have a different category like flavors of soup. And the way it works is when your card comes out, if you have the same symbol as an opponent's card, what you have to do is name something from the category displayed on their card before they name something on the category displayed on your card. It is fast, it is exciting, it is really funny. It's an excellent play, it goes really quick. That's Anomia, my favorite word-based party game. All right, the next category I have is performance games. Now, performance games are ones where your job in playing is to try to perform in some way. It could be verbal, it could be physical, in order to do something for the game. So charades is a perfect example of a performance game. I would say Taboo as well, although you might argue Taboo is a word game. I would say the performative part, the speed, the skill with which you perform, the clue giving is the essential part of Taboo more than the word itself. But the clear winner in this category for me is Monikers. Now, Monikers is, of course, an adaptation of the common folk game Celebrity, in which people write the names of celebrities and put them in a hat, and then you take turns trying to get people to say them. In Monikers, they curate that list quite nicely, and then they augment it by having you do different things in each round. The game gets harder and harder as you go through, but since you're using the same cards, you have a limited pool of choices in the later rounds. Works really nicely. Yeah, so in that regard, Monikers is the clear winner in performance games for me. You know, you might also put in pitching games that have a significant performative element, but that's not all, or Snake Oil. These are games that have an element of you making the people agree with your position or performing it. The same can be said for Super Fight. Those games are fine, but really I'm just mentioning them so you recognize that I have an idea where they are in the list, rather than that I think they're particularly great. They don't land on my favorite list. Next up is the category. Now, I know I did an episode about this on the podcast within the last year. I will find it and link to it in the show notes if you want to listen. But these are silly games. Now, not all silly games are party games, of course, and most party games are not silly, although plenty of them have an element of silliness to them. I think of games that have you doing something silly for a few minutes as particularly good. And obviously, if you've listened to my podcast for any length of time, you know my drop-dead favorite silly game. But I'm going to tell you 3 others that I really like. These are all ones I talked about in that episode about silly games. But of course, we have Call of the Wild. This is a game in which you're trying to win cards by getting other people to make the same call you're making. Of course, sometimes you're making the call of the animal on which you want to predate. Other times you're making a call of the animal with which you would like to mate. And your goal is to find and mate with animals that are the same as you, or find and eat the animals that are later than you on the food chain. Of course, sometimes the animal that's making a call will be trying to eat you, so there's that. So that's Call of the Wild. Very fun, very silly, very quick. The next one in a similar vein is Dude and More Dude. Although I think of these as one game, I have both of them, but I put them in the same box. Dude is the game where you say dude, and you say it in different ways to try to get people to match what you're saying. And then More Dude is the same thing, only you're saying dude in different ways. Both games are excellent. It's the kind of game that's really fun to play once a year or once every 2 years with a new group of people. Play it for 15 minutes, you've played 2 rounds, and you're good to go. So that's Dude and Call of the Wild, 2 of my favorite silly. And I'll put in an honorable mention here, Bunny Bunny Moose Moose, the Vlaada Chvátil game, in which you are making hand symbols with your hands to make either look like a bunny or a moose, with the idea of hiding in a way that you won't get shot by the hunter when the hunter comes out. Now the game is, again, probably like Codenames and So Clover, too thinky to really be a party game, but it does play up to 8. Or 7, I guess. But the silly game, of course, the silly game that I love the most is Happy Salmon. There is perhaps no more pure kind of game, or exemplar of the kind of game that I'm talking about as Happy Salmon. In Happy Salmon, you are trying to high five, bump fists, switch spots, or do the Happy Salmon, which is a kind of Roman handshake, but instead of grasping one another's forearms, you slap it like the tail of a salmon. And the person who does this with the most other players the quickest wins. It's very silly, excellent fun. I don't know when we'll be able to play it again because COVID, but a delight nonetheless. So the next party game that I would like to talk about, these are sharing games or solo creative games. These are games where there is a prompt or something to do, and you go and do a thing by yourself and contribute it, and then everybody engages with that thing that you've contributed. The runner-up for this I would call the Game of Things. The Game of Things is really interesting. It asks you a question, and everybody writes their answer to the question on a piece of paper, and you take turns trying to guess who wrote which answer on the piece of paper. It's pretty amusing, really works well in a large group, and it's fun if you know the other people very well. By contrast to the one that I'll say as the winner is a game that works in the same pattern, but instead the categories are movies, abbreviations, dates, famous people, and obscure words, and that's Balderdash. I think Balderdash is very nearly a perfect party game. It's funny, it's extensible to large groups, it's the kind of game you can pick up and play for 10 minutes and put it down, or play for an hour and still be having fun. It requires you to be a little clever, which I don't mind because I think of myself as a little clever, and it is just a really fun time. So that's Balderdash, my favorite of the you have to be a little creative and share a little bit kinds of games. Some other games in that category would be something like Scattergories is another one. That one, again, you're trying to be creative and then not match the other people. You also have stuff like Blank Slate, or the new one, The Green Team Wins, which is another one where you're filling in things on a whiteboard and trying to match what the other players have written. As you know from my review, I did not think very much of Green Team Wins. I didn't enjoy it. That could have been just a bad day or a bad experience or a bad game. Any one of those is possible. So those are sharing / creative solo games. And then finally, this last type of game, again, is arguably not necessarily a party game. Whereas some other games are quite clearly party games. This brand of game might, on occasion, have too many rules to really fit the party game model. In addition, some of these games run a little bit long, and they're often not games that you can jump in and out of. I am, of course, talking about social deduction games. Now, social deduction games are a type of game in which there is a shared goal, and some percentage of the players are trying to meet that goal. Some other percentage of the players, usually 1 or 2, sometimes as many as 4 out of a 10-player game, are trying to undermine that goal, but do so secretly. The exemplar, the high point of this genre is, to me, the Resistance Avalon. The Resistance Avalon is an alternative version of Donald Eskridge's The Resistance, which is a pretty great game. The Resistance Avalon just adds a couple more touches in terms of a good guy who can try to steal the win from the bad guys, and a bad guy who can try to steal the win from the good guys. These two elements really add a layer of deceit and a layer of tension to the game that makes it just about perfect. I also like the theme quite a bit, and there are even other role cards as well if you want to give people some additional complexity. There are several other social deduction party games that I find compelling as well. Despite its theme, I like Secret Hitler. It plays really well, and while it is pretty luck dependent, it does hit all of those notes that you'd like to hit in a social deduction game. I do really enjoy the Secret Voldemort version because it's slightly less gross. There's also Two Rooms and a Boom, which is perhaps the most party of the social deduction party games because it plays up to 30 people and works really well in the neighborhood of 15. In Two Rooms and a Boom, you are trying to set up a you are trying to either blow up the president or keep the president from getting blown up. But then once everybody knows how to play the simple game, then you add in a whole bunch of layers of complexity that give everybody their own motivations and their own goals and create all of these secondary and tertiary interactions between the players. It is fantastic, and it would hit my, it would supplant the Resistance Avalon in terms of its variety and the number of people it can play, but I just like the Avalon better. So, like, in the end, I think Avalon is just a more fun game, but Two Rooms and a Boom is incredible and wonderful. In addition, I would say there's a couple more party-style social deduction games that are worth a note here. The recent one, Scapegoat, which I mentioned on previous episodes, fits this bill. It's relatively easy to get into, relatively short. The older game, One Night Ultimate Werewolf, fits this as well, although that game is so random and often you have little to no evidence to go on. It ends up just being accusing one another without really any evidence to speak of. The Scapegoat, at least there's a little more evidence in operation. And perhaps the height of the very short social deduction games that I think is pretty great is the Chameleon. The Chameleon, of course, operates like the old game Spyfall, in which you are trying to hide that you're the traitor among a group of non-traitors, and everybody's trying to suss out among the others who's the traitor. It works really well and is delightful in its simplicity. It's the kind of game where it takes 5 minutes to play a round, but you want to play 20 rounds of it. So, those are 5 different categories of party games that I enjoy. I didn't even talk about trivia games. Wits and Wagers would be my top there. So I guess I just did talk about trivia games. I guess I'm curious from you listeners, do you enjoy party games? Which party games do you like and why? Head over to Board Game Geek, Guild 3269, and share your thoughts on party games. Do you like the ones that I picked? Would you have gone with a different one for the top of these categories? That's the place to share it. If you want to play a party game with me, you probably have to come to Toggle Gaming every Tuesday night in Palatine, Illinois. That's the place to do that. Or meet me at a conference sometime. That's harder to do. We have a variety of ways you can get a hold of me. You can write me an email, brendan@rattleboxgames.com. You can send me a geek message, wombat929 on Board Game Geek. You can even arrange a play with me in one of the digital implementations of board games like Board Game Arena, Boîte à Jeux, or Yucata.de. In all of those places, my name is Wombat929. Well, I hope that you've enjoyed this chat about party games. I look forward to hearing your thoughts on that genre. In the meantime, thanks for joining me on my walk tonight. I hope that your next walk is as pleasant as mine was. Goodbye.
Brought to you by Rattlebox Games.